questions or comments? I've got many, but I don't want to be egoistic. Anushi, you need to run here though, because I can't throw at you the mic, sorry.
I have a question for everybody. So, looking at the past and the history of ISEC, if there was something you could change in the association, whether it be for the better or for the worse, what would that one thing be?
In the history of the association, for better or worse, what would that be? So who wants to start? Tough question.
It's not like, usually people don't know, I mean, our ISECers do not know the type of risk, I mean vital risk, we sometimes had to take to establish ISEC. I knew that in Prague, where I tried to bring ISEC under strict communist rule. And I was there for 2 days, surrounded by special police day and night. And I really felt the danger. And just to tell you how things happen, a guy arrived and told me in the ear, listen, I am from ISEC in another country, and I'm here just under a pretext of health to see if anything happens to you, so that I will be able to say what has happened. A few years later, so I survived, and a few years later, but I had to live with the feeling of immediate vital danger. And some 2 or 3 years later, we went to... Chérie, quelle était la ville? Oui, bon. We went to... Comment? Non, la ville où on est allé...
Vienne.
Non, pas du tout. The country where we went for an ISEC meeting, and when we saw the guy who was with me in Prague, and I said, well, how come you're here? He said, well, listen, things change. In this country now, I'm a minister. So this means that we have followed the history. Bratislava, yeah. We have really lived all the history of those last 70 years, and this, I think, should never be forgotten, because it provides strength for today and for the future.
Certainly. Thank you, Jean. Lionel has... yes. Thank you for that. Please.
Getting back to the question itself, what would I change? Looking back over these, not in my case 70 years, because I'm nowhere near as old as Jean, right? And I would have placed much more focus, much more emphasis from the beginning on a structure that enabled permanent funding at the international level, the national level, and the local level to define methods and sources of funds that did not compromise the objectives of the organization, did not cause the organizations to change from being a student-run organization by students for students, but provided a means of funding to grow the organization and sustain it on a long-term permanent basis, the same as most other international organizations do, whether it's the Rotary or any of these other ones, whether it's government-sourced funds or university-sourced funds. We should have had a means of growing financially at the same time as we were growing in terms of our actual activity. And I don't exactly know how I would have organized that, but I think it's one big missing link in our organization that is what has brought us to the situation now where we're a big organization in 126 countries, and we have 400 members and a couple of $1,000s in the bank. This need not have been if we had focused attention on permanent sources of funding, not just recently, but from the beginning. And I take responsibility as well. I didn't have any problem with funding. I got funding very simply in England when I set up traineeships. I said, well, a traineeship is 3 months, and so commit for 3 months, consider it a charitable deduction, bring the student for 2 months and give us the other month's salary as our fee. And that worked perfectly, and I did the same thing in Canada. So I had no problem in funding in the activities that I participated in, but I should have been thinking further about how does the organization itself, and those sources of funds that I got were from business, they weren't from government, and it sustained us and did as well. But the one thing I would change is how we take a long-term view of funding the organization.
Thank you for that. Alex.
Yeah, to the question, what should be changed or what maybe as well should be addressed in the beginnings and the mid of the 90s, I think there is two things. We created, together with a German guy called Jochen Metz, now it is winning, we created something called the exchange process. And we were always driving for numbers. You know, we have always as well been asked by the partners, do you grow the figures? We've been always asked by the board of advisors, do you grow the figures? Yes, we had the exchange quality board, but the exchange quality was more or less focused on, are the right people matched to the right companies? Is the exchange realized and is the reception working? But what I would change is to focus on the reintegration part and on the measurement part, what kind of impact that exchange experience had. Lionel was referring that he had never seen on conferences like that a dissatisfied person who had a bad experience. For me that's clear because they wouldn't be here. There were people who were not satisfied and they left ISAC and they are not contributing to peace, self-fulfillment, humankind's potential. And we should focus and should have focused on those as well. So to cut the long story short, measurement, impact, reintegration into the communities. When you have been 1 year on exchange in Russia and then you come back home to your country, what did that mean to you? Because sometimes it was even strengthening the stereotypes instead of clearing them off. That's the one thing. And the second thing is, we have at those days not addressed a clash I feel now as well within the alumni organization between being inclusive and exclusive. Isaac came from an exclusive elite, and as well with you, Isaac, it changed more and more to open it up to be as inclusive as possible. But there is a clash, because there's quite some alumni who still think that's an exclusive club and you have to have an incentive to be in there. And we have to address what is important at the end of the day. The important at the end of the day is to have an impact on society for reaching our vision and mission. And we should allow as many ways to do that. And if it's with senior, high-level governmental affairs, and you only get those people if you have some specific exclusivity, okay, that's one way. If you say, I want to get as many people as involved to be as loud as possible on the globe, and that's the other way. We did not address that question in the 90s, and I feel that the alumni from the 90s and the 80s that are now in this habitus experience that they don't know how is the mapping. Is the mapping as many as possible, or is the mapping high elite to go into these decisive cycles?
I think it's, well, the question is sort of like on its face, it looks like a challenging one. An organization like ISAC actually is like a ship changing skin every year, and in terms of change, it's ever-changing organism which has allowed it to evolve, and it has by far broader impact than any other organization that I can think of that has the same scope of activity. But if there is only one thing that we can tweak, if we can go back to the in the history and we can slightly tweak that, is really around the sustainability and the continuity of the organization in terms of capturing or in keeping track of every single individual in the world that has been part of ISEC, and then enabling the future generations to draw the conclusions around the impact, and also enable the sustainability from a funding perspective, in the sense that now if you look back, when ISEC was formed, almost every 5 to 10 years, back in that period, there was a major war in this world. Since then, we haven't seen any such conflict at the global scale, and we've been fortunate enough. And if we just think for a moment, like, which are the leaders that we've seen over the years that we were able to recollect that have been associated with ISEC, probably it will be a little bit selfish from our perspective if we don't recognize the tremendous impact that this organization has had at an individual level, local level, national level, as well as global level, in terms of preventing and ensuring the growth across the globe, as well as I think, the concept of eliminating borders. Look at Europe. Europe is a diverse pool of nations that have been in wars, in conflict throughout the history. And that has not been ever since the European Union has been created, which is something that organizations like ISEC has facilitated at the local level and between the countries. So, long story short, I think it's just keeping track of what actually we have as a heritage, as people that have been associated, and then just tapping into those, whether it is from a resource perspective or actually just assessing the impact that they have had across their communities, is something that will enable us to realize the true potential of this organization. Thanks.
Jean?
I don't know whether you know that I have been given a nickname by an ISEC international meeting. This nickname is the Stone Age Tycoon. So I think that this morning I have rather been Stone Age than Tycoon, and my previous answers, I'm not very proud of it, so I better keep my mouth shut for some time.
I think the thoughts here are actually quite aligned, because I still remember when Jean came to Poland, and how he started the speech was vision comes first. And I do believe that whenever we think of changes in ISEC, we should start with the vision. And what comes to my mind is yearly turnover that we have in leadership bodies, and how it is actually affecting us being able to be very powerful as an organization and having strong management capacity. So I don't know if it is something to change, because this is the nature of ISEC, having yearly turnover, but this is something to look into, how yearly changing leadership bodies is influencing us being actually powerful as an organization and being able to reach our final objective.
That's a very good question, because it's in the nature of the organization to give everybody a chance to participate in the management of it, and it's also a big limit, because it doesn't provide for full continuity of that. I don't know, Lionel, do you have any comments on this when you set this up in this way?
Well, the biggest concern when we set it up was to avoid any involvement in politics or in religion or in ethnicity or any of those kind of issues that divide people. So we wanted to exclude any influences that could introduce that. So the independence and integrity of the organization was prime, which is one of the reasons why historically many local committees, national committees, were suspicious of an alumni organization, because they saw it as an opportunity for outsiders, no longer student active, interfering in some way. So they saw them as potential interference rather than potential assistance. And I think over the years that has changed. Certainly in the last 5 to 10 years it's changed enormously, and that has now enabled the kind of conversations we're having between AAM, I, and AI, which give us full potential. But we were very successful in shutting out. Now, I helped introduce Yugoslavia, which was a communist country, to the organization. I provided 10 traineeships with British Rail to the kids from Ljubljana, even though they were a communist country, because they made their own decision, they ran their own show. The university didn't, the International Union of Students didn't, the government didn't. They were truly independent, and we were able to verify that, so we welcomed them in. The fact that they lived in a communist country was irrelevant, didn't care. All we cared about was that the students made their own decisions, ran their own show, and were equal with the rest of us. The reason we didn't go into Russia was because the students there couldn't do that on their own. They could not be independent, and it wasn't until Russia came down that all of a sudden there was this wellspring of people that wanted to participate, and now they've been huge participants in ISEC, but the barrier was the issue of independence, and I think that was one of the things that has enabled ISEC to flourish, because wherever it goes in the world, whatever country, whatever religion, whatever politics, whatever dictatorship is irrelevant to the operation of the local ISEC students.
Yes. Yes. We have a question.
So this question was originally to Jean, but I open it up to others as well if they want to answer. I think a lot of times we ask questions about the past. You know, what was it like being the founder of ISEC? What happened in those early days? I have a tendency to think a lot more about the future, and I'm curious to ask you about the future. So you talked about one of the things in ISEC being the risk, and it seemed like a very political and mortal risk to put your life in jeopardy going to the countries that you went to. What is one of the biggest political risks you hope that ISEC takes in the future?
The risk ISEC for the future is to become political. We are non-political, we should remain non-political, and we should stress the fact that we are a private organization. We don't receive orders for anybody. We are free to take our decisions, and with us, women and men are treated alike. And all main responsibilities are democratically elected. This is, I think, absolutely essential, and this is, I think, the power of ISEC will be much bigger when the formal agreement will be done with my very close friend, former French Prime Minister, I told you about, and with his new Foundation for Peace. Now, if we use the protocol that we agreed between his network, he has already, I don't know, several thousand of top international people. If the agreement with ISEC network is properly governed and signed, the result will be gigantic, absolutely gigantic, and there is no limit. And as somebody said sometimes, I did not know it wasn't possible, so I did it.
Thank you, Alex.
I think what we should do, and people know me, I've said that for the past couple of years always, and sometimes it got polarizing and sometimes I got maybe misunderstood, so I want to clarify. I would really like this as well, the alumni understand, and that we translate it to youth leadership on IPMs and sit with the president and make this point clear. yes, no misunderstanding, we're a non-political organization, but being non-political does not mean being political disinterested. There's a big difference. I think everybody here in the crowd knows what the difference is. But if we claim that politics doesn't interest us, we become close to the border of irrelevance, because our life is political. Reality out there is political, and if we say having an impact, enabling leadership, changing for peace and fulfillment, what is acting against peace? Politics. Full stop. Yeah? So if we really want to change something, it's not coming to a sea, hugging each other and being best friends, because that is loading our battery. That is friendship. That is what keeps us together. But we have to go out to our environments, non-ISEC environments, our jobs, our families, and if there is something saying all the Hungarians are gypsies and they should be burned, I want to sit with this person and find out where the statement is coming from. And here we touch politics. So being non-political, meaning not funded, not supported, not from one side or the other, absolutely we have to resonate. That's one of the core pillars, but it doesn't mean being not interested in politics, because then we close our eyes and we will not impact the world.
Thank you, Alex. Pedreg, you want to add something? Then I have another question coming up.
Just briefly, so in my opinion, I think the biggest risk in the future for ISEC is failing to foresee the changes that we're seeing that we have seen, for example, in the last 10 years, for example, that the technology has had in terms of the impact on the workforce, on the workspace. Now, most of us probably at least one day in a week, or at least part-time during the year, we work remotely. ISEC, and this is something that I shared with Pavel the other year, we need to think outside of the box in terms of providing virtual internships or opportunities for people that still, unfortunately, they don't have the chance to get a visa or get approval or find the money to basically go out, learn something new, and have that experience. This shouldn't be a privilege for the few. It should be available to everyone, anywhere in the world. If we are not in Cuba or in Cyprus, for example, there was no ISEC in Cyprus due to the pasta of the place, but that didn't restrict me there to hire people from ISEC in Jordan, from ISEC in Egypt, from other neighboring countries, and bring those people, because I know what ISEC brings with the people that has gone through that training process. So I think it's all about foreseeing what actually the future brings and then adapting to that way ahead, rather than letting other organizations in the same space to have to take that opportunity from us.
Thank you. We would like to go on forever with this, but we cannot, unfortunately, so we have a last question from the floor.
My question was partially answered, but maybe we can come to more concrete conclusions regarding inclusiveness and regarding the situation in the world. The situation has changed, and I think everybody sees the rise of nationalism and fundamentalism. And do you think, is there anything special that ISEC or ISEC alumni could and should do? Because we talk about inclusiveness, which is very right, we talk various programs, but these people who are nationalists are not here, right? We are in the same group of like-minded people. How far should we go? How far should we open up ourselves to talk to these other guys?
I can tell, Renat, I can tell exposure on individual level, civil courage. When you go out there and you hear a statement you cannot resonate with, or when you hear a statement, be it in your family and be it that you know I'm now starting a provocative discussion, do this discussion. Because when we as well talk about leadership, and we don't like to see the leadership that is shown somewhere on the globe, it's never a problem of one person or one party, it's a problem of loads of people who were saying we are not happy, we have fear, and that's why we go in that extreme direction. I say that the source of everything evil is fear. People People are not bad born, people are not bad per se, but there is something happening that they are not satisfied, and that makes them full of fear, and out of fear is coming extremism, and any kind of extremism should be leveled, and you can only level it if you expose yourself, if you sit there and say, I heard your statement, it's important to me to understand where it's coming from, and how can we, as people, support that one is cooled down.
Thank you. I think Jean wants to say something.
Catherine just reminded me that I don't know how many years ago, I had a project of ISEC passport, and I printed it. I printed an ISEC passport, which could be used for alumni and for students, and I think this should be taken again as a formal project, because it speaks for itself. What do you think?
I agree, and I want one. Lionel.
Respectfully, Alex, I have to disagree with you, and I have to disagree with what I suspect Renata is concerned about. I have those same concerns. I am a political animal. I went to the London School of Economics, for Christ's sake. I went through all that political thing. There are other means to express yourself when people come into power that we don't like, we think are wrong, and do not really follow the principles that we as ISEC believe in. But there are channels to do that. And I do not believe that ISEC should be used as a political channel to express views, to oppose governments or people that we don't like, because they're exactly opposite to the principles we believe in. Our objective, if I come back, is the development of the individual. None of that stuff really matters on the individual level. People develop themselves, they have their own expressions, if they want to become politically involved, that's their choice. But I do not think we should represent individuals in any kind of political manner, no matter how much we disagree with what might be going around us, because that fundamentally does not meet our objective, which is to assist students to become stronger leaders, stronger individuals, to lead a more principled life, and to develop themselves to their full potential. I agree with what you say with a concern, but I think it's not relevant to individual self-development, and ISEC should not allow itself to be drawn into the whirlpool of politics, because it changes from government to government from time to time, and it would threaten, in my view, the long-term existence of our organization.
Just, I have to be crystal clear understood, and I don't want to be quoted wrongly, so I make it clear. Any ISEC institution is a political channel. That was not what I said. I just said that the values and the principles we are educated here, we are appreciating here, we have to take to our private life and show civil courage as an individual, not as an ISEC functionary, not as an ISEC president, not on an ISEC Twitter channel, not on LinkedIn whatsoever. That has to be super clean and super clear. But what I say is we will only have impact in our local societies if we do not close our eyes and say, oh, this is politics, I don't interest, I go to the next IC and there everything is perfect. I say we need to educate people, because leadership translates to civil courage in your daily life, and there you have to have a stand.
I will take a last remark from Lionel, and I want to turn this into a discussion between the two of you.
I'm very pleased with that clarification. You realize there are many ISECers who've gone on to become prime ministers, cabinet ministers, involved very strongly in the political activity, because as individuals they do what they believe in from a political point of view, but it has never affected the issue of ISEC's independence.
I'd like to give the chance to Aga and Pedreg to also comment on the question coming from the floor. So what, in your opinion, the ISEC alumni should be doing? So please.
It was also what ISEC should be doing, right? So my heart is telling me the first thing, do more exchange. And especially, how can we do more exchange with cooperation of alumni? because I truly believe we have huge potential to do it, and we should be thinking together, how can we enable more young people to actually go to exchange experience, and that's what I'm thinking constantly, how can we be working next year so that we are doing this together. At the same time, exchange is not inclusive because it requires very often fundings, which sometimes young people don't have. So here we can come to the point what Fadel is right now proposing and thinking about. What are the products that we can have that would be developing leadership for peace, that would be more inclusive and would be for more people? So how can we have more what's, and how can we work on it together so that we have other options that are more inclusive for young people?
Thank you, Aga.